Humanity had earned its place among the stars, but peace had come at a cost few other species truly understood. The Interspecies Academy stood as a symbol of that fragile unity, a place where young minds from dozens of worlds learned side by side. On the surface, it was a success. Beneath that surface, old instincts still lingered. Among the students was a quiet human boy who rarely spoke unless spoken to. He moved carefully through crowded halls, avoiding attention, keeping his head low. Around him, taller, stronger alien cadets filled the space with confidence. To them, he was easy to ignore, or easier to target. It started small, as it often did. A shoulder bump that lingered a second too long. A laugh that followed him down the corridor. A path deliberately blocked so he had to step aside. To the alien cadets, it was nothing serious, just a display of dominance, a natural order they had never been taught to question. One afternoon, it went further. The boy's belongings were knocked from his hands, scattering across the floor. The laughter was louder this time, sharper. He knelt quickly, trying to gather everything before more attention found him, his movements hurried and tense. Not far away, an old man watched. He wore the simple uniform of maintenance staff, his posture slightly bent with age, his movements slow but deliberate. Most passed him without a second glance. At 93, he looked like someone the galaxy had already forgotten. But his eyes told a different story. They didn't see just a frightened student. They saw patterns. Familiar ones. Lines drawn not by species, but by behavior. He had seen groups like this before, strong, confident, certain of their place, and others like the boy, trying to disappear to survive. The old man stepped forward, quietly, without urgency. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He simply moved into the space between them. The laughter faltered not from fear, but from confusion. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. His voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. One of the alien cadets looked down at him, unimpressed. To them, he was just an old human, slow, fragile, irrelevant. "No problem," the cadet replied with a smirk. "Just teaching him where he stands." The old man glanced briefly at the boy, who had frozen mid-motion, unsure whether to stay or flee. Then he looked back at the group. "Where he stands," the old man repeated softly. There was no anger in his tone. No challenge. Just a quiet curiosity that didn't fit the moment. Another cadet chuckled. "You wouldn't understand." For a moment, the old man said nothing. He simply studied them, one by one, as if measuring something invisible. Then he nodded slightly. "You're right," he said. "I don't understand." The admission seemed to amuse them. A few of them shifted, relaxed again, expecting him to move along. But he didn't. Instead, he took another step forward, not aggressive, not confrontational, just enough to hold their attention. "So tell me," he continued, his voice still even, "what do you think strength is?" The question hung in the air longer than expected. One of the cadets answered quickly, almost instinctively. "Power. Control." Another added, "Not backing down." The old man listened, his expression unchanged. "I see," he said. His gaze drifted briefly toward the scattered items on the floor, then back to them. "And this," he asked, "is how you use it?" There was a flicker of hesitation now, not much, but enough to shift the tone. The confidence was still there, but it wasn't as effortless as before. "It's just how things are," one of them replied, less certain this time. The old man considered that, then gave a small, thoughtful nod. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Or maybe it's just what you've never had to question." The words weren't sharp. They didn't accuse. But they landed heavier than anything louder could have. For the first time, the group didn't immediately respond. The boy on the ground slowly gathered the last of his belongings, his hands still unsteady, but his attention now fixed on the old man. The corridor had grown quieter. Not silent, but different, like something had shifted just beneath the surface. The old man remained where he stood, unshaken, unhurried. And for reasons none of them could quite explain, they were still listening. The silence didn't last. One of the alien cadets stepped forward again, a faint edge returning to his voice. "You're making this bigger than it is, old man. This is nothing." The old man studied him, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet patience that felt out of place. "Nothing," he repeated softly. "That's an interesting word." Another cadet folded his arms. "It's just how we establish order. He needs to learn." The old man nodded once, as if considering the idea seriously. "Order," he said. "And you believe this teaches it?" "It does," the cadet replied. "It shows him his limits." The old man's gaze shifted briefly to the human boy, then back again. "I've seen limits," he said. "Real ones." There was no change in his tone, but something in the way he said it made a few of them straighten slightly. "I've seen what happens when someone stronger decides another life matters less," he continued. "It doesn't start with destruction. It starts like this. Small. Dismissed. Easy to ignore." A cadet scoffed, though it sounded less certain now. "You're talking about war. This isn't war." "No," the old man agreed calmly. "It isn't." He paused, letting that settle. "But the thinking is the same." That landed harder than expected. A few of them exchanged brief glances. "You think we're the same as soldiers?" one asked, a defensive note creeping in. "I think," the old man said, "you've never had to find out where that path leads." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step closer. He simply stood there, steady, grounded. "I was younger than you when I first saw it," he went on. "People who believed strength meant control. That if they could push someone down, it proved they deserved to stand above them." The corridor felt tighter now, the air heavier. "And for a while," he added, "they were right. They had the power. No one stopped them." The cadets weren't smiling anymore. "What happened?" one of them asked, quieter than before. The old man's expression didn't change, but something deeper settled behind his eyes. "They forgot something important," he said. "Power doesn't teach you what you are. It reveals it." No one interrupted. "They kept pushing," he continued, "because no one challenged them. Because it was easy. Because it felt like nothing." He let the word linger. "Until one day it wasn't." A faint shift ran through the group. Not fear, something more unfamiliar. Discomfort. "They met people who had lost everything," the old man said. "People who didn't have the luxury of treating others like nothing." His gaze moved across them slowly. "And when that happens, strength stops being a game." The cadet who had spoken first looked away for a moment, jaw tightening. "We're not like that," he muttered. The old man didn't argue. Instead, he asked, "Then why does it look the same?" No one answered immediately. The question didn't accuse. It didn't demand. It simply sat there, impossible to ignore. The human boy was no longer looking at the floor. His breathing had steadied, his posture no longer folded inward. The old man noticed, but said nothing about it. "I'm not here to threaten you," he said after a moment. "And I'm not here to fight you." That much, at least, seemed obvious. "I'm asking you to think," he continued. "Because once you understand what you're doing, you don't get to call it nothing anymore." The corridor remained quiet. The confidence that had filled it earlier hadn't disappeared, but it had changed shape. It wasn't as solid as before. And for the first time, the cadets didn't look at the old man and see weakness. They saw something they couldn't measure. The old man let the silence stretch, not to pressure them, but to give the weight of his words room to settle. "You think strength is something you show," he said quietly. "Something others have to see." No one interrupted him now. "I used to think that too," he continued. "When I was young, I believed being strong meant winning. Standing taller. Walking away while someone else stayed down." His gaze drifted for a moment, as if looking at something far beyond the corridor. "It took me a long time to understand how wrong that was." One of the cadets shifted, uneasy. "Then what is it?" he asked, almost reluctantly. The old man looked back at him. Strength, he said, is what you choose to do when you don't have to prove anything. The words were simple, but they carried something heavier than authority. I've stood in places where I had every advantage, he went on. Where the person in front of me couldn't fight back, couldn't escape, couldn't even hope to win. A faint tension ran through the group. And in those moments, he added, I learned that the easiest choice is rarely the right one. The cadets were completely still now, their earlier confidence replaced by quiet attention. You can hurt someone weaker, he said. Anyone can. It doesn't take skill. It doesn't take courage. He paused, letting the truth of it sink in. What takes strength is stopping yourself when you could keep going. The human boy looked at him, something new in his expression, not fear, not yet confidence, but something forming between the two. One time, the old man continued, I was ordered to finish something that didn't need finishing. The threat was gone. The outcome was decided. His voice remained steady, but there was a depth to it now that hadn't been there before. I could have followed that order, he said. No one would have questioned it. No one would have blamed me. The cadets watched him closely. But I didn't. A quiet shift moved through them. I chose to stop, he said. Because I realized that if I didn't, then whatever I was fighting for didn't matter anymore. The words lingered, heavier than anything he had said so far. You think this is small, he went on, glancing briefly at the space between them and the boy. Something that doesn't count. He shook his head once. This is where it starts. No one argued. Every time you decide someone matters less, he said, you take a step in a direction you won't notice at first. His eyes moved across them, steady and unwavering. But one day, he added, you look back, and you won't recognize who you became. The corridor felt different now, quieter, but fuller, as if something invisible had shifted into place. The cadet who had spoken the most earlier exhaled slowly, his posture no longer as rigid. That's not what we want, he said, almost under his breath. The old man nodded slightly. I know, he replied. That was the moment it changed. Not with force. Not with fear. With understanding. The cadets stepped back, not because they were told to, but because they chose to. The space around the human boy opened again, but this time it wasn't empty in the same way. It felt respected. The old man didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. No one spoke for a while. The shift was quiet, almost invisible, but it held. The cadets who had once filled the space with laughter now stood with a different kind of awareness, less certain, more thoughtful. The ease of their earlier confidence was gone, replaced by something heavier, something they hadn't expected to carry. One of them moved first. Not forward, not aggressively, just a small step back, enough to clear the space completely. Another followed. No one said it out loud, but the message was understood. The human boy remained still for a moment, as if unsure whether this change was real. Then, slowly, he straightened. His grip on his belongings steadied. He didn't rush away this time. He stood. That alone was different. The cadet who had spoken the most earlier glanced at him, then looked down briefly before meeting his eyes again. It wasn't an apology spoken in words, but it didn't need to be. The absence of mockery, the lack of pressure, that was enough. The old man watched it all without interruption. This was the part that mattered. Not fear. Not obedience. Choice. After a moment, he turned slightly, as if preparing to leave. There was no announcement, no expectation of thanks. Whatever needed to be said had already been said. The human boy looked at him, hesitation flickering for a second before he spoke. Why did you help me? The old man paused, considering the question. Then he answered simply. Because someone should. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't meant to be. But it stayed. The boy nodded once, holding on to those words in a way that suggested they would last longer than this moment. Behind him, the cadets remained where they were, quieter now, each caught in their own thoughts. What had felt like nothing before no longer fit that description. They couldn't unhear it. couldn't unknow it. The old man began to walk away, his steps slow but steady, blending back into the role everyone expected him to play. To anyone passing by, he would look like he always had, just another aging human moving through his routine. But something had changed. Not in him. In them. Humanity had never been the strongest species. Not the fastest. Not the most physically imposing. But it had endured things others had never faced, carried lessons others had never needed to learn. And sometimes, those lessons spoke louder than strength ever could. The corridor returned to its usual rhythm, but it wasn't the same. The space where the boy stood no longer felt like a place to avoid. It felt like somewhere he belonged. The war that had shaped the old man's life was long over. But its lessons were still doing their work.